Hello, my name is Carrie Brown and I'm with the Central Mississippi Regional Library System. Today I'm going to be reading to you Happy Thanksgiving, Gus by Jacklyn Williams. Mrs. Morrison walked into the classroom. She flipped the lights on and off. It was time for the students to settle down and listen. As you know, next week is Thanksgiving, she said. To help us celebrate, I want each of you to bring in a picture of the one thing you are most thankful for this year. When the bell rang, the students started filing out the door. Don't forget to bring your pictures on Monday, Mrs. Morrison reminded them. Gus groaned. How am I going to choose the one thing I'm most thankful for by Monday? He asked Bean. Gus and Bean climbed into the bus. If I made a list of everything I'm thankful for, it would be a mile long, said Gus. I can't choose just one. You have to, said Bean. I guess I could bring a picture of my mom, or one of me and you, said Gus. The bus stopped. Gus and Bean got off. Don't forget, my mom's taking us to the farm in the morning, said Gus. We'll have fun picking vegetables for Thanksgiving dinner. I won't forget, said Bean. See you in the morning. Early the next morning, Bean showed up at Gus's house. Why did you bring your camera? Asked Gus. In case I see something I'm thankful for, said Bean. That way I can take a picture of it. Great idea, said Gus. The boys piled into the back seat of the car. Everybody ready? Gus's mom asked. We're ready, the boys said. Then let's go, she said. At noon they rolled through the gates of Franklin's farm. Everywhere they looked there were things to pick. Vegetables in the garden, pumpkins in the patch, apples in the orchard. Let's go, hollered Gus. Hold on a minute, said Farmer Franklin. Before you get started, I have to warn you about Mr. T. He'll get you if you don't watch out. Gus and Bean froze. Who's Mr. T? They asked. Mr. T is the biggest, meanest turkey that ever gobbled, said Farmer Franklin. Just then a huge turkey strutted by. There's Mr. T now, said Farmer Franklin. Remember, mind your manners while you're here. Mr. T doesn't like anybody, especially if they're bigger or meaner than he is. Billy's lucky he's not around, said Gus. Mr. T would get him for sure. Just then the barn door swung open. Out walked Billy. Well, look who's here, he said. What are you doing here? Gus asked. Farmer Franklin is my grandpa, Billy answered. What are you two doing here? We're here to pick vegetables for Thanksgiving dinner, said Gus. I'll help, Billy said with a smile. I don't think we're going to like his kind of help, whispered Bean. Gus and Bean made their way through the long row of vegetables. They filled their baskets as they went. Look, said Gus, a scarecrow. The boys walked over and stood in front of it. Gotcha, hollered the scarecrow as it grabbed Gus. Gus was so scared he threw his basket into the air. All the vegetables he had picked landed in a pile at Mr. T's feet. Mr. T smiled and began to peck. Very funny, Billy, said Gus. Come on, said Bean. Let's go look for a pumpkin. Look at that one, shouted Gus. He pointed to a huge pumpkin sitting on a hill. They pulled their wagon to the top and set the pumpkin in it. The wagon's wheels sank into the soft dirt. Now what? Asked Bean. Let me help, said Billy. He gave the wagon a big push. The pumpkin bounced down the hill. Finally, it reached the bottom. Splat! Come on, said Bean. Maybe Billy won't find us in the orchard. Gus and Bean finished filling their basket with bright red apples. Hey, Gus, shouted Billy. Catch! He threw an apple at Gus. Gus jumped for it. Splash! Water spurted high into the air as Gus landed in the water bucket. The water made a puddle beside Mr. T. He smiled and began to drink. Gus and Bean went back to the barn looking for Gus's mom. Instead, they found Billy. You guys want to jump in the hay? Billy asked with a smile. He had moved the hay right on top of a mud puddle. Sure, said Gus as he started running toward the pile of hay. Stop! Yelled Bean. Gobble, gobble, gobble! Shrieked Mr. T. Billy fell right into the puddle of mud. Mr. T looked at Gus. Just then, Gus knew what he was most thankful for this year. Gus posed with his new friend. Say cheese, said Bean. As they drove away, Gus looked out the back window of the car. There stood Farmer Franklin waving goodbye. Beside him stood Mr. T, his beak turned up in what seemed to be a smile. Monday morning came quickly. Gus sat at his desk trying hard to wait for his turn. Finally, Mrs. Morrison said, "You're up, Gus." Gus held his picture tight against his chest. He headed to the front of the room. "I'm thankful for lots of stuff," he said. "I'm thankful for my mom and for my best friend Bean. But right now, I'm most thankful for my new friend, Mr. T." The end. Thank you. Goodbye.